Hey, welcome to Better Piano. If you want to transform your piano skills almost instantly, then stay tuned for this video because we're going to talk about 3 ways that we use one incredible system to absolutely transform your playing in an instant. Check this out. So the system we're going to talk about, you may have heard before. It's called the number system, and it's a very interesting way of thinking about music that makes it incredibly easy to think about so many different things that we do in music, and I'm going to tell you why. But more importantly, we're going to talk about 3 different ways to actually think about this system, because I think this can kind of be confusing if you're first starting out really getting familiarized with the number system and how to use it. So let's dive into that. The number system, very simply put, is just assigning a number to every degree of the major scale. So if we take a look at a C major scale, we can look at the note names for all of these, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and that brings us back to C, an octave up, right? And if we go back down, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Now that's great. We can do a lot with that. We can write out chords. We know that a major triad is made, in this case, from C, E, and G, right? And we can do all kinds of things if we know the note names. That's fantastic, right? However, it's going to transform your entire understanding of music if you simply start to think about everything as numbers. Here's what I mean. Rather than C, we're going to just call this 1. And then the second note of the scale, we're going to call that 2, and so on and so forth. We have the third note of the scale. The fourth note of the scale is 4. The fifth note of the scale is 5, 6, 7. But this brings us back to 1 because it's the same thing. We could start it up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? We generally usually refer to C's as 1. Because it makes it so that it doesn't matter what octave we're in, we can kind of just always say that, oh, C is 1. Now, there's actually going to be an exception to that rule, but we'll talk about that a little later in the video. So the 3 ways I want to talk about utilizing this number system are really, really important to understand and to differentiate from one another. They are the ways that we use the number system to identify music and to make it easier for us to learn music. And perhaps most importantly, it makes it very easy for us to communicate music, right? To explain to someone else what we want something to sound like. So let's talk about the first usage of the number system, and that is to explain melody. Of course, we recognize that as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and if I were to write that melody out, you might read it as G-A, G-E, C-A, G. Right? G, A, G, A, G, C, B. That's great, but it's even more convenient if we just understand the numbers. Because I can tell you, oh yeah, it starts on the 5. Well, if we think about our major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. 5, 6, 5, 3, 1, 6, 5. And because we know how Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer goes, we can probably figure out that 1, we're talking about like 8, theoretically, right? 5, 6, 5, 3, 1 or 8, 6, 5. 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 1, 7. We can explain melodies in this way. Now, the reason why we would think about it this way, and as opposed to just the note names, we're going to talk about a little bit later. But there is one huge reason why this absolutely transforms your understanding of music. But first, let's talk about the second usage of the number system. Now, this one is a little more common. The first one is common, but it's more like an available tool if you need it. The second one is far more widely utilized, and that is to identify chords. More specifically, we're talking about the construction of chords. Now, in the beginning, we said that a major triad is made from C, E, and G in the case of C major, right? We're talking about the C major scale here. And the C major triad is C, E, and G. So the second way we're going to use the number system is for constructing chords. We're literally going to use the numbers to tell us what notes actually are used to build a chord. Now, in the case of C major, it's not C, E, and G. Instead, it's the first degree of the scale, the first note of the scale, the third degree of the scale, and the fifth degree of the scale. And that helps us go like, oh, okay, cool. Like I know it's 1, 3, and 5. Now we can add stuff to that. What if we want to make it a C6 chord? 1, 3, 5, 6. What about a major 7th chord? 1, 3, 5, major 7, right? What about a minor 7th chord? 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7. We just unlocked another secret to the number system. You can alter any number. Because we're talking about the major scale, right? That's what we said. We said we start from C major. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. But any note in C major can be changed. We can make this flat. Oh, well, instead of being D flat, well, it's just the flat 2. It's the second degree made flat, right? Or how about the third made flat? And we know from our knowledge of major and minor that minor just means that we've made the third flat. So identifying chords using the number system and using the number system to construct chords is probably something that you've already had familiarity with, even if you've never thought about it in this context. But when we talk about building a triad, we start typically very early on in our piano education with the understanding that a major chord is built with 1, 3, and 5. That is the usage of the number system as it relates to building and constructing chords. But it goes so much further than just 1, 3, and 5, and we just illustrated that somewhat with sevenths. But it goes even further than that. This is where the exception to that 1 octave rule comes in. And this is one of those things we start to learn as we start dealing with more complex chords. There is a thing in the number system, and we call it upper extensions. It's basically, we don't want to be limited to just these notes to make a chord. Because we can put chords, we can put notes on top of that. We can do all kinds of things on top of that. Once we leave those first 4 notes, right, and we exit that first octave where we have built our basic chord, we've put our triad down here, and maybe we've added our 7th here, and that's it for the first octave of a chord that we want to build, really. So as soon as we leave that first octave, we enter what we call the upper extension. We can add notes like that, or we can add notes like that, or we can add notes like that. Or if you're Jacob Collier, we can add notes like that, right? And what we're doing here, that actually is a really great chord. We're creating an upper extension. Now, what would I call what I just did? Well, we started, we know, with 1, 3, 5, and 7. Right? We made no alterations. These are the 1, 3, 5, and 7 that exist in the major scale. So we're just going to say 1, 3, 5, and 7. But unlike when we were doing our scale and we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oh, there's 1 again, right? We're now going to keep counting. That we call 9. That would be the 11, and the note that I played was this, which we would call a sharp 11, because I took that 11 and I made it sharp, right? So that's a sharp 11. Well, we just keep going. That's a 13. We can go all the way up to 13, and like I said, if you're Jacob Collier, you might have like a sharp 15, or yeah, whatever. But so these are the upper extension notes that we can mess around with, and we can change the quality of those notes, right? Let's say I have a dominant chord or a C7 chord. That consists of a major triad plus a flat 7, right? Things start getting really interesting in the upper extension once I start playing a dominant chord like this, because what happens if I take my 9 and I make it flat? I get that sound. Well, what if I have an 11 and I make it sharp? Whoa, what if I have just a regular 13? Whew! That is some spicy chord right there. Beautiful, right? And all of that I'm able to discuss and I'm able to construct with intention because I'm familiar with how the number system applies to upper extensions. And this is that exception to that octave rule. We talk about 9s, we talk about 11s, we talk about 13s, we can talk about 15s if you want. Not very common, but you know, it's a thing. Now the important thing to notice here is that 9 is the same as what? Well, if it was down here, that's just a 2. Okay. Well, what about a sharp 11? Well, that's the same as sharp 4. Okay, so 2, 4. Well, by doing a little bit of math, we can assume that our 13 is the same as our 6. And when we fill in all these notes, we end up with a scale. That's it. They're upper extensions because we have left that first octave and we've played them up here. But theoretically, they're the same notes that you would play here, and that would just create a scale. This is going to eventually unlock the secrets to like chord voicings any way you want them and improvisation. The understanding that all chords are just the answer to the question, well, what scale are we using? Because if you condense chords together, you wind up with some type of complete scale. And that is usually a really great option for improvising with, using the notes that we have when we combine everything together. And you can build chords any way you want. If I know I have these, I can spread these out on the piano any way I want to. Sure, why not? But that leads us to the third usage of the number system. So what we just talked about was how the number system applies within a chord, right? And we normally use that language. We say, oh, it's 1, 3, 5, 7 with a flat 9 and a sharp 11 and a 13, or however you want to say it. Whatever chord it is, we can explain to somebody how that chord is constructed using the number system. But we need to take a step outside of chords and talk about chord progressions, because this is going to be the most common and widely applied usage of the number system. When we talk about chord progressions, we're going to talk about them as numbers. Now again, we still have one very important detail as to why, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. The quickest way to explain to fellow musicians how a song is constructed is to use the number system to explain the chord progression. You may be familiar with the term 2-5-1. Jazz musicians use this term all the time to explain this sound. Now, within that 2-5-1, can I take this chord and say, oh, well, it's 1, 5, flat 7, there's a flat 3, and a 9. Yeah, I can absolutely do that. But we're thinking like one level outside of that. And we're just saying the 2 chord, the 5 chord, and the 1 chord. The 1, of course, in this case, was E flat. So, if we take the E flat major scale, we know that the 2 is F, the 5 is B flat, and the 1, of course, is E flat. So we can explain a chord progression as, oh yeah, it starts on 1, and then it goes 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5, and then we can do cool things like we can say, oh, and then there's a 2-5 leading to the 4. Let's break that down really quick. So again, if we're in E flat, we're saying 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, so if we're gonna play a 2-5 leading to the 4, let's think of this as home base for a second and go, what's the 2 of that? Well, it's this, and the 5 of that would be this, and that would lead to this note, which is the 4 of our home bass key. Now that might sound a little bit complex, but trust me, these are just the language things that eventually you get to you get the feel for it. More importantly, you start to understand the sound of it. Like if we go back to what I was saying before, 1, 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5, then a 2-5 to the 4 would sound like this. Ah, that's a cool sound. What about a flat 7? Whoa. Then a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. This is how we talk about chord progressions when we get to a little bit more of an advanced level. It's incredibly useful, but there's one main reason why all of this is the absolute transformative, instant, complete change in how you think about music, and that is because numbers are universal. What does that mean? Let's go back to our C major. We said that we're going to think of these instead of note names as numbers, but we never really talked about, well, why? Okay, well, it can help us build chords. Yeah, I can see that. It can help us understand upper structures. I can see that. It can help us understand maybe chord progressions. Yeah, it can help with that too. But like still, why is it necessary for us to think in numbers? Because check this out. Remember how I said in E flat, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Let's change home bass. What if home bass is A flat major? Let's do the same thing. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. How about D flat major? 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Numbers are universal. A major. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. They're universal. It doesn't matter what key we're in. We can be in any key. We only need to understand the music one way. And if we're familiar with all 12 keys, which of course is an advanced thing to be familiar with all 12 keys. I don't even think I'm familiar with all 12 keys well enough to play in any key at any time, but I can understand if you tell me, oh, it's a 2-5-1. Okay, what key? Because no matter what key we're in, we can call it a 2-5-1. This makes communication of music absolutely insanely easy, because no longer do we have to go through, oh, but in this key, it's A major 7, it's an F sharp dominant chord, and then a B minor 7, and an E7, and then A major 7. Okay, well, what if we want to change keys? How about F? Or now it's F major, D7, G minor 7, C7, back to F major. That is just too much. It's just too much. It's too much to deal with. It's too much to have to talk about or try to tell somebody. You know, it's way easier. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Numbers just transform your understanding of music in an instant. It makes everything so much easier because everything becomes universal. We can just think about things as like, sick. I don't care what key we're in because I know that it's a 2-5-1. So if, I don't know, you say you're playing with a singer and they come in and they got a cold that day and they're like, hey, instead of doing this high, I need to do it a little lower. Can we do this in a different key? You're like, I don't care because I know that the numbers are still the same. So if there's a 2-5-1 in the key of B flat, there can be a 2-5-1 in the key of G flat. Totally different chords with totally different names and totally different notes. But because we're able to refer to them universally with numbers, it makes it so much quicker and so much easier to just think about. Now this, of course, is a pretty advanced concept that can take a while for you to become familiar with. But the important thing to understand is that the number system has 3 distinctly different applications: melody, chords, and chord progressions, and that the reason the number system is so important is because it allows us to speak about music universally in the simplest terms. We are absolutely going to talk more about this, and we certainly will be talking more about it inside of my brand new community over on betterpiano.com. And if you haven't heard yet, Better Piano is a place that I've recently built and launched because I wanted to solve a fundamental problem that I feel like online music courses just can't really solve, and that is ensuring that you do them. Maybe you played piano once when you were younger and for whatever reason you gave it up. Maybe life got in the way, maybe you had a bad experience, but for whatever reason now you're thinking about playing the piano again and you're like, you know, wouldn't it be great to be able to play some of the things that you know and love, and that you'd love to play for your friends, your family, your loved ones, whatever. You have goals on the piano, and Better Piano is designed to help you reach them. It has my entire library of piano courses that have helped tens of thousands of students reach their piano goals, but more importantly almost, it has what I think is the missing link to getting online music education to be way more effective, and that is a dedicated community where you can be surrounded by like-minded individuals who all have this goal of learning to play this instrument. Learning to play the piano can be really isolating if no one else in your life is also currently learning. So wouldn't it be amazing to just have a place where everyone is talking about the same stuff, we're all sharing music, we're all sharing our struggles, we're all encouraging each other to work towards reaching our individual goals. That's what Better Piano is all about, and I've been absolutely blown away by the community we've built in just a very short period of time since we've launched. And because it's only been a short period of time, you can take advantage of special introductory pricing as we build out this community. It's available at the link in the description down below, and I would love to see you over in the community on Better Piano. So use that link, it's the best way to support the channel. I'm so appreciative of that support, and I can't wait to see you inside. That's it, that's gonna be all for this video. We will definitely be diving more into the number system in the future, but for now, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.